Greetings, health champions. Today, we will explore 10 distinct insights that your feet can reveal regarding your liver health. The initial observation to make is whether your feet exhibit a yellowish tint. It is essential to consider various aspects, as the implications differ significantly if the entire foot is involved compared to when only specific parts are affected. If the discoloration affects the entire foot, it is likely indicative of jaundice. This condition relates to the liver's ability to process bilirubin. When the liver is unable to keep up with the breakdown of bilirubin, it can lead to an accumulation of this yellow pigment in the body. The yellow coloration will primarily impact the sclera, or the white of the eye, as well as the skin initially. However, in more extreme instances, it may also be observed on the feet. If the yellowing is confined to the soles of the feet, it is likely a condition known as carotenemia. This occurs when there is an excess of carotenoids in the bloodstream, often due to a diet high in yellow foods, such as carrots, pumpkin, and sweet potatoes. It is possible that you may wish to reduce your intake of certain foods. The situation could be that while carotenoids, specifically carotene, are intended to be converted into vitamin A, excessive consumption of carrots and other yellow foods might hinder this conversion process. Therefore, you might still maintain adequate levels of vitamin A despite the high intake of these foods. However, it is important to consider that if there is any stress on the liver, and if it is not functioning optimally, the processing rate may decrease, potentially worsening the situation. If the yellow discoloration is limited to the toenails or the area around them, it is likely indicative of a fungal infection. Additionally, if there is liver dysfunction, it may lead to a compromised immune system. Fungi, like many pathogens, are opportunistic. Therefore, a weakened immune response can create an environment where these pathogens can flourish. However, if you are experiencing liver issues or have a fatty liver, it is likely that you are also dealing with insulin resistance. This condition can exacerbate fungal overgrowth, as poor blood sugar control creates an environment that is particularly favorable for fungus. Consequently, elevated blood sugar levels can worsen the overgrowth situation significantly. Discoloration can also occur when liver toxins begin to accumulate, as the liver struggles to break them down. This accumulation can impede nail growth, which is already a slow process. If the growth rate decreases further, the nails may become thick, brittle, and yellow in appearance. If your liver is underperforming, you may face the risk of developing imbalances in your microbiome, known as dysbiosis. Given that a significant portion of your immune system relies on the proper functioning of your gut, any issues in gut health can subsequently lead to a decline in your immune response. Sign number 2 is if you have cold or numb feet, and there could be two different things. The first one is poor circulation, and this can have to do with your poor liver function, like a fatty liver, but also insulin resistance, and the liver is your primary metabolic factory, and it makes different proteins that regulate the blood viscosity, the blood thickness, and insulin resistance leading to high blood sugar will cause blood vessel dysfunction. Because that high blood sugar, it causes a swelling and a dysfunction of the inside of the blood vessel, so they can't regulate blood pressure and circulation as well. So when your circulation suffers, it's going to affect the periphery. First, it's going to affect the body parts furthest away from your heart, so that's your hands and your feet. And when that circulation goes down, it's going to affect both blood vessels and nerves. And that's where you can get that numbness and the tingling also as a result. But it could also be that you feel cold because of slowed metabolism. So thyroid is your master regulator, your thermostat that regulates metabolism, and the liver is responsible for converting your thyroid hormone, the T4, into the active thyroid hormone called T3. And the vast majority of that conversion happens in the liver. So when that liver is struggling, that can also affect your overall thyroid function and can slow down your metabolism. Sign number 3 is red burning feet. And if the liver is struggling, it can't keep up with breaking down all kinds of different metabolic and inflammatory byproducts. So now if we get a buildup of these toxins, they have the potential of irritating blood vessels and nerves, and this in turn can trigger some cytokines, some pro-inflammatory. Those are just chemical messengers that signal inflammation. And when we get inflammation, some of the hallmarks are that we get redness and swelling and heat, and we get vasodilation. So the blood vessels dilate to let more blood through, and that's where we get the redness and the heat. But also, if the liver is not functioning at its best, it can start accumulating iron. So we get excess storage of iron in the liver, and that's not a good thing. There is a disease called hemochromatosis called iron overload, and this could be genetic, but some people just develop a lot of iron buildup, even though they may not have the genetic portion, and iron is supposed to be inside your red blood cells. When it's elsewhere, it tends to be sort of very corrosive, like rusting your body. And it's a huge stress on your liver and your pancreas primarily, but also on all the cells when it's not where it's supposed to be. And then this hemochromatosis, this rusting iron, this corrosive iron, further irritates these blood vessels and the nerves. Sign number 4 is itchy, dry, and flaky feet. So when the liver is struggling and we get this toxin buildup now, the body is going to try to get rid of it someplace else, because the liver is one of the main pathways to get rid of toxins. But if we can't get it out, if the liver is not keeping up, the body is going to try some other pathways, and one of those important pathways is through the skin. And if we have toxins exiting the skin now, of course they're going to cause inflammation and irritation and possible itchiness there. And if the liver is struggling, it may not make enough bile, and with less bile, we're not going to absorb fats as well. And that includes the essential fatty acids, the omega-3s, that are super important for moist and functional and elastic nice skin. So if our bile and our essential fatty acids go down now, we can end up with dry and flaky skin. And then there's something called histamine. Also, it's a natural substance. We get it through food. We keep it inside certain white blood cells called basophils, and they're part of inflammation and allergic reactions. Now the liver is going to break down most of that once it gets out of the circulation. Out of the stomach, into the circulation, and into the cells. After that point, the liver is the primary thing that breaks down histamine, and if the liver is struggling, we could get excess levels of histamine, and now, of course, we could get some allergies and some skin reactions and some irritation from that. Swollen feet and ankles rank as the 5th concern. The liver plays a crucial role in producing albumin, a key protein essential for maintaining the viscosity of blood. When the liver is compromised, its ability to synthesize sufficient albumin diminishes, which can disrupt the osmotic pressure necessary for water retention in the bloodstream. If you think about what blood pressure is, it is a pressure that moves the blood around inside tubes, and if we have higher pressure inside those tubes, it's going to have a tendency to push the liquid, the fluid, the water out through those membranes. So we need to have something inside to act like a sponge and hold the water there so we can balance out that blood pressure and not start leaking everywhere, but with less albumin and with less osmotic pressure. Now we're going to start seeing some of that leakage and water getting out. And one more way that this can happen is if you have a buildup of toxins and you have insulin resistance, now you're going to start activating what's called the RAAS, or the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. And this is the system in the body that regulates blood pressure and fluid balance. And what happens if we activate this system now? We're going to have sodium retention. We're going to tell the kidneys to increase the amount of sodium and water that it reabsorbs. So because of these two things, we're going to have water retention. We tend to hold on to more water. We increase our blood pressure, which of course increases the edema, but we also hold on to water. So now we make that edema worse. Sign number 6 is cracked heels. And if the liver is struggling, then we may not have the proper processing of essential fatty acids, because the liver is critical for the digestion and absorption, but also the processing and the distribution of these essential fatty acids that are critical for keeping the skin intact. But the liver also makes amino acid. It makes precursors that the body later uses to put together collagen. So it's the amino acids are the building blocks, and the collagen is a critical protein for skin to stay tight and strong. And then if the struggling liver is also associated with insulin resistance, now we're going to have a reduction in circulation, like we talked about, and if circulation goes down now, there is less delivery of oxygen, so we can't make as much energy in the tissues in the feet, and we also can't deliver enough nutrients, enough building blocks to make the repairs happen, and then we're probably also going to have high blood glucose levels, high blood sugar. And what happens with proteins and sugar? If they're high, they tend to stick that sugar. The higher the blood sugar, the more it tends to stick to proteins. That's a process called glycation. And this damages the proteins, and this can happen to collagen as well. And now we're going to get stiff and brittle skin that is more likely to break and crack. Number 7 is dark patches on the feet, and this is similar to in type 2 diabetes, where you can get something called acanthosis nigricans, which are velvety, dark, thickened patches of skin, and they typically happen on the neck and the armpits mostly, but also can happen in the groin, and they can happen on the feet, and they mostly develop in those areas, like the armpits and the neck, where there are friction and pressure points, where you get some rubbing from clothing or body parts, rubbing together, and then when you have that friction, you have extra wear and tear. So when you wear and tear, you need to repair more often. And if you have insulin resistance, then those repairs don't happen quite right, because insulin is what's called mitogenic. It increases the growth rate, it increases the rates of cell division, so it's like we get a little bit too much growth when we repair it. And this accounts for the thickening and the velvety structure of those patches. And then these patches often turn dark because of something called hyperpigmentation. And pigment is just the thing in the skin that gives it color. And the liver normally regulates the pigments and the processes leading to pigment regulation. But if the liver is struggling now, we're going to have more oxidative stress, and we're going to have an increase in ages in advanced glycation end products, just like we talked about before with glycation, where the sugar sticks to the protein and damages those proteins. And when we have too much oxidative stress and too much of these ages, that will tend to produce too much of those pigments as well. And the 8th thing that your feet can tell you about your liver is if you have toenail fungus, that could mean that the liver is struggling, because normally the liver is involved with filtering out pathogens. And if we get a buildup of pathogens and pathogen byproducts, now the immune system is going to experience some stress, and we could get a fungal overgrowth just like we talked about earlier and like we said before. If we see an increase in blood glucose level, blood sugar levels, like we typically do with some liver stress or fatty liver, now we're going to see pathogens thriving. A lot of the non-friendly bacteria are going to thrive on that sugar, and that's going to contribute even further to that fungal overgrowth. But one more thing that can happen is from this toxic buildup in the liver is that it won't be able to produce the glutathione that it normally does. So if we see a reduction in the glutathione, which is the body's #1 antioxidant on the inside of cells, now our cleanup ability and our immune system and our ability to fight off pathogens is going to suffer as well. Number 9 is gout, and gout is when you have very, very painful joints that are caused by uric acid buildup, and the #1 place this happens is in the big toe joint. And if the liver is struggling now, we're going to see a reduction in the processing of uric acid. So uric acid is a two-edged sword. It's very critical to find a balance here. And usually, we only hear about the bad parts about uric acid, causing crystals and pain, but uric acid is actually the most important extracellular antioxidant. Glutathione is the most important intracellular antioxidant. And once uric acid gets into the cell, now it changes, and it goes from being good to being bad. Basically, it becomes pro-inflammatory and causes inflammation, insulin resistance, and destruction. And when we get an excess of uric acid, mainly from liver dysfunction and from insulin resistance now, it can crystallize inside the joints, and it is excruciatingly painful. It's like having little pieces of broken glass inside your joint. And a lot of this goes back to metabolic health, to fatty liver, to insulin resistance. And when we break down fructose, then it increases the levels of uric acid quite dramatically, And also, when we have insulin resistance, it leads to the kidney functioning differently. So just like insulin resistance causes an increase in reabsorption of sodium, it does the same thing with uric acid. So we're going to get rid of less. We're going to reabsorb more of the uric acid as well, which are several different factors causing a buildup and an excess level. And the 10th thing that your feet can tell you about your liver is if they start sweating and smelling bad, and we touched on this mechanism before, that if the liver isn't keeping up and the toxins start accumulating, the body will try to get rid of them through some other pathways. So now it will increase the activity and the excretion through sweat glands in the skin of the feet. But that's not all that can happen, because a struggling liver can also contribute to dysbiosis, an imbalance in the gut. And now if we have dysbiosis, those pathogenic bacteria will produce additional toxins. And in that environment, we're going to see an increase in inflammation. And now those two factors are going to stimulate your sympathetic nervous system, your stress response. You increase your sympathetic drive, and now that causes more sweat. And when the sweat stimulation comes from that sympathetic nervous system, you're going to see it in 3 different areas. Primarily, you're going to see it on the hands, on the palms of the hand, on the soles of the feet, and you're going to see it under your arms and your armpits, and you have probably noticed this sometime. If you get really nervous, for example, then you start sweating in your armpits, under your arms. And some people have problems called hyperhidrosis, where their hands get very, very wet and sweaty. And if you ever get excess sweat in these areas, then you know that it's going to be from a sympathetic nervous system, from a stress response. But again, that stress response isn't just emotional. It can also be caused by chemical reactions in the body and from dysbiosis. And what a lot of people don't realize is that we have a characteristic flora, a collection of bacteria for each different body part. So we have the most of them. We have inside the gut, but we also have one for the mouth. We have one for the hands. We have one for the feet, and so forth. And if you have an imbalance in your gut flora, then chances are you're going to have an imbalance on the skin as well. So you get skin dysbiosis on the feet. And this is why we have people who have problems with odor on their feet. Sweat by itself does not stink, but some people, they tend to develop that odor much, much faster and to a much larger degree. And of course, the liver is not the only thing that could cause a dysbiosis or a bacterial imbalance in the gut or on the skin, but it is one of them. If you found this video enjoyable, you're sure to appreciate the next one. For those who are genuinely interested in mastering health through a deeper understanding of bodily functions, I encourage you to subscribe, activate the bell, and enable all notifications to ensure you never miss an invaluable video.